The Detroit Lions did not have a great year last year, but I don't think anybody really expected them to have a great season. But I'll tell you why. They were competitive. Dan Campbell had them going. They were hungry, and they hung around in a lot of their games. It's six of their losses last year. They were 3-13-1. They had a tie last year. They tied the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. They almost won that game. They probably should have won that game. Six of their 13 losses were decided by 8 or fewer points. They were actually one of the most profitable teams in the spread game, and they were never favored, and they were always underdogs, and they hung around. They covered. I do remember a game against Baltimore last year, another game where they gave Lamar Jackson fits, and they almost won that game. What was the score of that game? 19-7 they lost. So they really started their season with a ton of losses. I mean, San Fran, they got blown out, but do you remember that game? I remember a lot of people had San Fran as a sleeper, and Detroit was hanging around. They lost that one by 8. Then they went into Lambeau and lost, and they lost by 2 to the Ravens. They lost to the Bears by 10. They lost to the Vikings by 2. They got spanked by the Bengals. They hung around with the Rams. That was a game they lost by 9 points. They did get spanked by the Eagles. They tied Pittsburgh, and they lost to Cleveland by 3. They lost to Chicago by 2. They beat the Vikings. They did get spanked by Denver in Denver, tough place to play. They beat Arizona. They crushed the Cardinals. At that point of the season, Arizona was really good. Couldn't lose. They lost the Falcons by 4. They did lose to Seattle towards the end of the season. They had a win there for Green Bay. Let's bring up their win total. Obviously, they're long shots here for everything, right? You see the record 3-13-1. They're 150-1 to win the Super Bowl, 60-1 to win the NFC, 10-1 to win the NFC North. I do believe that they're on their way. Like I said, Dan Campbell, a pretty good coach. Like, they were really competitive. I like some of their pieces. I like some of their weapons. Win total 6.5. It's a little high, right? I do think we'll see a few more wins from them. Maybe they get to 5. Maybe they get to 6. I don't think that they're a 7-win team. The division is not great. How long more does Aaron Rodgers hang around? And then do we see their rebuild in Green Bay? So, one team is kind of on the rise. There's certainly more weapons in Detroit than there is in Chicago for Justin Fields. So that is a positive. I'll roll through the schedule here, and then we'll get into some of their weapons. If they start week 1 at home against the Eagles, I'd be honest with you guys. If I thought Philly was going to lose that one, I'd give it. It's going to be tight. I will probably pick the Lions on the spread. If it's like 3.5, you give me the hook, I'll probably do that. But that's a game I think that they'll lose. I think they'll beat Washington in week 2. So they get the split. They start off at home. There's 1 win. In Minnesota, there's a loss. I think they can beat Seattle. There's a win. They got 2 in New England. There's a loss. So 2 wins through the first 5 weeks. They got an early bye week 6. Then they come out of the bye in Dallas. That's a loss. Home to Miami's a loss. Green Bay a loss. I'll give them Chicago as a win. I say they beat the Giants. There's 4 wins. Sorry, Tyler. Buffalo's a loss. Say they beat Jacksonville. There's 5 wins. Minnesota's a loss. At the Jets, I give them a win. So that's 6. Carolina, Chicago, and Green Bay to round it out. And it's probably, all losses. So it will be key for them if they can get the split against Chicago, if they can get the split against Minnesota, one of those 2. And then there's some favorable matchups, a matchup against both New York teams, which they could get, the Jacksonville game that they could get, the Washington game that they could get. And they could also get the Eagles too. They really could get the Eagles as well. Let's look at their fantasy football targets. I kind of feel like I'm out on a lot of these early guys. I like Swift. Don't get me wrong. I really like DeAndre Swift, RB8, ADP 12. Tyler, I don't know if you have the Swift note. You can put it up after if you want. There it is right there. So this is actually courtesy of our guy, Tyler. First 10 games before the injury. You see the attempts, the rushing yards, the targets per game, 6.7, very healthy, 5.3 receptions. So honestly, those numbers would be number 1 in the NFL. He was tied with DeAndre Swift in terms of targets per game overall at 6, and then receptions just shy of that. But he has been an absolute monster in the receiving game, and I expect that to continue here. So from a fantasy point, PPR, he was an absolute beast before the injury, so he was well on his way to being a league winner. There has been some issues with him injury-wise, but 79 targets for him, very healthy. I expect, at least 60. There's just a lot of other mouths to feed, so we can bring that up, Tyler, and just take a look at some of these guys. So I think Jamal Williams is free. You could take him at the very end. The beat Chris Meaney NFFC best ball. I took him with my last pick, round 26 or something like that. I think if you have Swift, why not back it up? I think he's a decent running back as well. If Swift misses time, Williams can step in there. But Amon-Ra St. was fantastic. He was a waiver wire pickup. He was a really slow starter. He wasn't getting a lot of playing time. The snap counts weren't there. You know, they were rolling out Reynolds and Cephas, and it's just like, why? And then eventually Amon-Ra St. got that role, but he's going pretty early, like wide receiver 24. I really like him overall, but there's just a lot going on. Jameson Williams, is he going to be ready week 1? Maybe not, but when he's in there, he's a deep threat. He's an absolute baller. DJ Chark probably has a rapport with Jared Goff to start the season. I expect Chark to, be productive early on, and then maybe Williams can overtake that role. I have no problem taking shots on either of those guys. I was thinking about putting them on the wide receiver sleeper list, but I wanted to talk to you guys about them individually here. I think personally, I'd rather take the upside in Williams, out of Alabama. I think I'd rather go that way, but, they're going back to back. And then TJ Hockenson, I'm just out on. There's just a lot of moving pieces. I'd rather just, early on Schultz or, maybe just wait a little bit and get a Cole Kmet or an Irv Smith or something like that, as opposed to TJ Hockenson. But he's a really good wide receiver as well. The guy I'm in on is Jared Goff. Why not? Why not Jared Goff? We got to get out of here, but why not Goff? I know he's not, a superstar quarterback, and maybe he was the reason the Rams didn't win the Super Bowl a couple years ago, but he made Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp productive. They were both wide receiver ones. He can spread the ball around. He averaged 35 attempts per game. He had 494 attempts in 14 games, so he's probably flirting around 600 attempts. That's probably going to be inside the top 5, top 6. They still got holes defensively. He's going to chuck, and he's got all of those weapons. He's going as quarterback 24. I'm not telling you he's going to be your top 12 quarterback or your number 1 quarterback. Superflex, bang on. He could be your 3rd quarterback off the board. I want to get him in the Scott Fish Bowl. I want to pair him up with Chark. I want to pair him up with Jameson, some deep threat guys there. He could be okay for you. That's all I got to say.